Hi, everyone. Today I am excited to be welcoming Mackenzie Nicole Salas to the Attachment Theory in Action podcast. Mackenzie is the co-founder of the Culture Shift Tour, a nationwide initiative transforming school culture through student leadership, mental health awareness, and meaningful connection. Since 2015, she's worked alongside her husband, speaker and recording artist Jared Scott, helping build a movement that reaches students, staff, and entire communities through live experiences and original motivational music. With a background in business administration and a deep passion for psychology, neurology, and epigenetics, Mackenzie blends science and soul into everything she creates. She is a writer of speeches, poetry, and music, known for her raw honesty, emotional depth, and ability to connect with people navigating the messy middle of becoming. Mackenzie is a proud wife and mother raising two boys and preparing to welcome a baby girl in August 2025. She is also co-owner of IBIY, a digital bracelet brand that tracks positive movement, and co-leads SpeakVi, a platform that mentors speakers and booking agents in building purpose-driven, truth-centered businesses. At her core, Mackenzie believes that when we choose truth over trauma, we unlock the power to heal, grow, and help others do the same. She's here to remind people that the striving, the stumbling, and the showing up are all part of the becoming. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Attachment Theory in Action. I am super excited to have Mackenzie Salas with us today. Mackenzie, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate you having me.
So I think I better say this before we move forward that we have, and folks who might be able to see the video can see Mackenzie's name says Jared Scott. We have a mutual connection. Jared was just wonderful enough to come and be a keynote speaker at our conference. And in our conversation and in working with Mackenzie in the background, we decided and discovered that Mackenzie, you have such a great story and you've been on this wonderful journey, wonderful and sometimes hard journey. And we felt like this would be just a great opportunity for you to share it and bring some of your wisdom to our listeners. So I'm so glad for you to be here today.
I'm excited. This is the first step in many, so I'm ready to if my difficulties can ever help anybody, then that's what they're for, in my opinion, at this stage.
Well, we appreciate that, and yeah. So, okay. Well, I always start my podcast with the same question, and that question is: do you feel like there was anything early on in your life, or in your early career that kind of has led you down the path that you're on, and led you to kind of want to know more about attachment, about trauma, relationships?
Oh, definitely. I am super glad that I grew up in the era of the internet. Um, I remember when we got our first computer. And before that, I was like in encyclopedias. I loved the library. So, from a young age, when I was a newborn, I had seizures in response to vaccination. Now I'll go ahead and say I'm not anti-vax at all. But I just had genetic predisposition to have that as a reaction. And so knowing that, and then I had a lot of allergies as a kid, like allergies as crazy as like walking on the floor made me feel like I was burning or something, like if certain
Wow.
adhesive had laid. So, of course, I heard all of these stories and knew all of these things. And I have like memories, like picture memories of being a kid, like mixing up my medicines. Like I had a homeopathic doctor because we had tried other routes. And so I would mix up my medicines like a couple times a day, spin them with a spoon. And like I still remember that as like a 4, 5, 6 year old. So of course, when I got older, I wanted to know more about like why. And I always had this deep belief of I want, I don't accept this as being my life forever, you know? So I took it as something that had to be assessed medically. And when I tried everything medically or homeopathic or natural, I realized, okay, I'm missing something here. This is none of this is working. And so that's when I started to get fascinated with epigenetics. And as a young adult in my 20s, I experienced a lot of loss, from really close friends committing suicide to some family members committing suicide. And then the person I was supposed to marry dying in an accident in front of me. And I was like, okay, there's been enough trauma in my life. Like, I can recognize that right now. I have not been going to therapy. It has been suggested and even supported by my parents and then my Nana, who went to school for psychology, my mom's mom. And I was like, it's time. So I started to go to therapy, and I started to get obsessed with psychology and uh, different modalities of healing in that direction. And that's when I really started to dive into assessing my whole childhood and
Mm.
teens and young adulthood, and like really diving back into it, because at those ages and stages, I was just surviving. I wasn't really taking in what was going on around me, or acknowledging that it was maybe something I needed to process or handle in a better way, or even that it needed to be processed or handled. That to me, it was normal. And then
Hmm.
as I got older, I realized my story was a little different than other people's story. And I think I started to realize that as I got older, because as I got older, I had more authentic relationships. As I went to therapy, I started processing, like, it's okay to talk about some of this stuff. I don't have to hold it all in, because that's what I did. I hid any struggles that were going on from friends, from coworkers, even from like extended family members. I just wanted everything to be good and everything was okay. And I was great all the time. And I was involved in all these clubs. And, you know, I was suppressing a lot. I think one thing that got me through was, one thing Jared says is suppression leads to depression and has to be solved by
Mhm.
expression. I did write from an early age. So probably starting at as early as I could write, and I could write pretty early, 5, 6, 7. I would get my little karaoke machine, and I would take it into my closet, and I would record myself on tapes, songs, and then write down songs, and then write poetry or short stories. I do think that was something that helped keep me grounded, because that was a form of expression, because I never really turned to substance abuse. Um, but I did have moments of like self-harm, things like that. Not severe, but I think, and you might need to tell me more about this. I actually read an article not too long ago about how some infants who cried it out as for a while in infancy, and it was intense, and I was a very stubborn infant who would cry and cry and cry and cry and like climb out of the crib, that they can be more prone to self-harm or self-punishment um, later on in their life, like for the remainder of their life, like that can be a tendency. And I thought that was really interesting. And it said something about skin picking, and I was like, oh, I did that. Like, it was bad. Like, I picked at my face, I picked at my fingernails, like
Mhm.
hangnails and things, just all the time, constantly. And I had to like break that habit. Um, so that's interesting that they come up with these new studies to even assess something like that. But yeah, I never really went down the substance abuse route. I would skin pick, or my self-talk wasn't great. Um, but outwardly, no one knew I was struggling with things like that, because I didn't think that was acceptable. So I portrayed it otherwise. Um, and that would all be but one one instance that I was honest. And I think this is something about that age, because I see my son. at this age, and he's like very honest. Like sometimes you're like, you can't tell people that, like, but then at the same time, I'm like, well, maybe you're right and I'm wrong, you know? When I was in second grade, I wrote a letter to a friend at a new school. This had been my third elementary school. And I wrote a letter that indicated I was going to take my own life.
Mm.
And so I got, of course, mandated reporter. My letter was reported. She told her mom called the school. And the next day I went to school, a counselor came and grabbed me from class. And she was like, what do you like to do? Like, I had no idea what was about to happen. She was like, what do you like to do? And I was like, I like to sing. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna take you where we do all these plays. We do junior Broadway plays at this school. It's kind of different. A lot of other schools don't do that, but our music teacher is very passionate about it. So let's go sit back there. And I want to show it to you. And, she showed me these things and like expressed all these different possibilities I could have at the school. And she was like, let's go backstage and sit back there and talk. I want to learn more about your life, and that was how I was approached. So that, now in saying that story, that was probably the first therapy session I ever had.
Mm.
I didn't have hired therapy until I was an adult, but that counselor went with me from elementary school to middle school to high school and assisted me in graduating early because I wanted to go to college. I was like, I'm done with the drama. Like, I just want to go to college. I want to work. I want to move out. Like, that was kind of my goal. And throughout all of those different years, she saw what was going on in my life and she knew about all the things. So it was really cool because it felt somewhat of like an extra maternal figure in my life. So I think that had a really big impact on me as well. And maybe even helped me to pick some of those outlets that I had, because I got very involved after that. And even like won awards at my elementary school and things for participating in choir and plays. And so she got me connected, and I didn't feel that way at that deep of a level again. So I think that was super important.
And I want to just unpack that a little bit because you said your words were that was probably like my first therapy session. And then I'm so glad that you then added, she felt like another maternal figure because in my mind, while I absolutely agree that it was very therapeutic to you, I almost wonder if that was one of the first times that you really felt seen and heard and valued.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was the oldest and I had a lot of responsibility. My dad and mom had split at this point. And my mom dealt with mental health issues and some disorders. My dad was very like reliable and present and responsible, but he was not a feelings guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd suppressed a lot of his own emotions. As I become an adult, I see, like, we talk about them now, but things that I never would have thought he would have talked to me about, which rightfully so. He knew the kind of relationship that we had with our mom was very open, and she shared everything with us. And so he was very guarded, which in some areas made me feel like I had to be perfect. I don't put that on him as an adult. Now I put that on myself. I'm kind of prone to that perfectionism, which Jared says is another form of procrastination. So I look at it that way to tackle it, because I'm like, no, I'm not going to procrastinate. So I think that those dynamics really went into how I felt about her and how I attached to her, as being a complete stranger, I felt very comfortable with her, and she, yeah, she just wanted to know who I was and what I love to do. And I felt very seen and very heard. Um, there was just a lot going on. I don't think my parents ever meant to overlook me
Mhm.
or neglect me, but they were, now that I'm an adult that has kids, I can only fathom going through a divorce with three small children and being able to give enough of yourself. I feel like I have a great support system, and I still have days where I'm like, did I give my kids enough? Like, do they know that they're loved? Do they feel seen? Do they feel important?
Mhm.
So I didn't always have this perspective though. There was definitely periods of time where I was like, how could they do this to me? It's all their fault.
Well, and yeah, we're not here to point fingers or lay blame necessarily. And when I'm working with a lot of the time when I work with educators, it's really helpful to give them this perspective that unfortunately, yes, there are caregivers out there who do abuse children, who do mistreat them. There's also caregivers out there who are really trying the best they can with what they have and
Mhm.
what they know. There are a lot of people in probably your dad's generation who were brought up with not sharing their feelings that
Oh, yeah.
we get up, we do our job, we come home, we make sure the food's on the table, and we go to bed. Um and so he was doing the best he could with what he had and with what he knew. And then if anyone who struggles with mental health concerns um is absolutely going to find it harder to give everything that they can. And so, yeah, it's a good reminder that not every caregiver's intention um, is a bad one. That they're
Right.
trying their best. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, because I think we all have different starting points. One thing, my mom and I have come a long way, and it's really because she has done the work. Um, Even since last we had our conversation, there's been more that has happened. So I thought that was really cool that it kind of got delayed because more things have happened since then. And I was like, oh, this
Mm,
is really cool because now it's going to be from like a really healed perspective that I can speak on all of this. Because that was kind of one of the last pieces. So she really put in the work. Like that's one thing I can say. All the times that she would apologize and be like, I'm so sorry for this and this and this that I did this, or I wasn't there for this. Um, and recognize and acknowledge these things uh, in my 20s. And so sometimes I didn't know how to respond to that. And I was like, well, it just clicked one day. Like she didn't want to do any of those things. Like she didn't know any better. She had a lot of trauma from her own childhood that she had not healed from or had any tools to deal with. And then she became a mom. And I understand that now, becoming a mom who has healing to go through. That's that's a lot. And then you go
mhm.
through a whole identity shift, I feel, becoming a mother. Um, Trying to figure out. I remember one day, like I felt like I couldn't wear any of the clothes that I had. I was like, that's so silly. Like, but it was just a huge identity shift. So with her not having a grounded identity before motherhood, and not being able to acknowledge or have support in her own circles for the trauma that she encountered as a kid really put her at a different starting point. And so I have a lot of respect for her, especially now experiencing more life, that she never gave up. Like I don't know how else to say this other than like, I know a lot of people that have taken their own life and the reasoning they had behind it. And my mom had a lot of reasons to take that route, and she never did. She got close at times, but she never did. and she decided to find more help or dig deeper. And
Mm-hmm.
she's gone to a ton of therapy. She goes to therapy every week now, even still, and is unpacking everything, talking with her siblings about things, her mom about things, her dad about things. Like, it's been a process. But I admire her for it because I now see how it's affected us children. So I tell her that all the time now when she tries to apologize for, I wish I would have done this differently, and your life could have been so different. Or, I wish you wouldn't have learned these things from me. And I'm like, now I see it as I learned what not to do
Mm-hmm.
by seeing that as an example. And then I also learned how to respond because she ended up going and doing the therapy and doing the work and taking responsibility and breaking generational cycles
Mm-hmm.
where the responsibility was not taken. So that helped me when I became a mom who realized after I had a child, I have a lot of trauma that I need to deal with so that I can be a proper parent and not continue these cycles. Since she had started doing that and was in her early stages, it kind of was a guidebook to me. So oddly enough, like, as difficult as things were with her as a child and a teen and a young adult, um, she taught me a lot about diving into the pain and expressing it and talking about it. Because my dad, as much of a rock as he wasn't doing that. I don't know that he still even has done that. He has all of my respect, but it's very interesting to see where my dad is at now and where my mom is at now.
Mm.
She has grown and changed and transformed. And my dad is still the same reliable source of responsibility, and he takes care of business and all these things, but I can see and feel all of the unaddressed emotions that he still has. And they present. Like, my mom's healthier than she's ever been. She just got married to a really great guy, and oh my gosh, we've all hoped and prayed for that for so long, because, and she'll tell you herself, she was dating guys that were terrible for her because of her own unhealed
Mm-hmm.
traumas and experiences and attachment to men. So that didn't help her at all. She was very attracted to narcissists, and would become an abusive narcissism and or a victim of a narcissistic abuse, and would stay in those relationships for almost a decade. So that never really allowed her a safe space to heal. But she was afraid to be alone. So continued to find herself in these types of relationships. But yeah, to see how she's grown, changed, transformed, and is like healthy, glowing, excited about life, and like knows so much about what we're even talking about. And then my dad is still my dad. Is very interesting to see as an adult. And I hope, and I'm the oldest child, so I'm the digger. And I've always kind of been that person who's like, hey, like, we should talk about this, or this is how I feel. I was the feelings kid. I've had a lot of feelings. And I see it in my oldest too. He'll even tell you, he's like, I just have a lot of feelings. So my dad did not know how to handle me and all. We don't talk about our emotions. We work hard, but he was the oldest, had a lot of responsibility, and so he didn't get to express his emotions or his resentment or anything that happened to him that was difficult. So I just find it really interesting to be an adult observing their parents, and how I have respect for them both, I think, equally now for different reasons. And as difficult and messy as diving into your trauma and your pain can be, it can result in something quite beautiful and transformative. So I'd say in my adult years, the example of life my mom set, even though at times was very chaotic, it taught me a lot. And as I've healed more and we've had more deep conversations about why things happened or had forgiveness, really, forgiveness being one of the biggest things I think, has transformed our relationship. And it's all in perfect time because I'm having my first daughter in August. So I really feel like I've said that for a while. I think, I don't think this is really possible, but I've always said, maybe we've had boys because I struggle with maternal relationships. I struggle with female relationships. So like my body was like, nope, we're not having a girl. We're having boys because boys are safe. And we know how to have relationships with boys. So
I'm a firm believer in that kind of experience, absolutely. And I'm really a scientist at heart, probably. Like I'm rooted in it, but I truly believe that there are either systems in us or these powers that really do dictate some of these experiences that we've had. And I want to take a moment too, Mackenzie, to just, I really respect the journey of healing that you've been on and the I mean, I can't begin to imagine just the complexities of it. I mean, just thinking about all of the different emotions that have gone along with your relationship with your mother and how to even navigate that roller coaster of, I love this person, but they're causing me a lot of pain right now.
mhm.
And then to see them make this amazing transformation and all of the feelings that must come along with that, the I wish this had happened sooner, but I'm glad that it's happening now. And how do I even process all of those feelings that you're holding whilst also raising your own children as well? And so,
Yes.
full respect for your mother, but also full respect for you in your ability to get to this point of acceptance, I would say it sounds
Mhm.
like.
Yes. I think, and that was a part of the journey too. At one point I realized that I was one of the reasons I was so resentful or angry is I looked at some of my other friends or even my husband's mom. And I was like, well, why can't she just be like this? Like, this is how she's
Mm.
supposed to be, And so I would compare. And that wasn't fair because they didn't have the same upbringing or starting point. And it took me time and healing myself to be able to actually recognize that and have room for understanding and forgiveness. And I remember one of the first steps of that being I so I had autoimmune off and on throughout my whole life until I was 27 or 28, depending on what time of year that, but 27 or 28, I'll be 32 in like a week. So I had autoimmune off and on, unexplainable things, but my antibody tests were positive. Allergies would come and go, hormones would like be zero. I'd have no hormones, which is crazy for someone who looked like they should have plenty of hormones and was a young adult. Um, so I, like I spoke about trying to address all of that medically, realizing, okay, this might be different. What really set that off was reading once in my own research that 76% at the time was 76% of all autoimmune diseases are rooted in childhood trauma. And I was like, oh, I have that. And I have both of these things. So
Mhm.
let's see how do we handle that? Like, how do we deal with that? I was aware of it. And Jared was really the first person. I'll be honest with you. Like I had friends. I would be looked at as very sociable. I had many friends. I was there for them. I wanted to know everything about their life. I loved to be people's counselor and helper, but I did not let people know all about my life.
Mhm.
Um, Jared was the first person that knew everything about my life and everything about me, because there was a lot of things I hid from people, because I felt they were unworthy. And in a really cool way, I think that in letting him see those pieces of me and him loving them, it helped me to love them myself. I don't know that it always is supposed to work that way. I think, in many schools of thought, you can't give what you don't have for yourself.
Mhm.
But he definitely helped me to love myself more. Um, and walked me through a lot of those things. Like, we did it together. We handled our trauma together.
Mhm.
We walked through it all, talked about all of it, experienced it, all the emotions. And then as he went back to school for all of this, and we were both already all reading books and listening to podcasts about all of it, we just had more tools. We had more strategies of how to deal with it. So one of the first steps when I realized all of this was I wrote letters that I did not send to all of the people that I felt like I had unforgiveness or negative emotions attached to. So that took about a year for me to really, being a mom too, and I was dealing with infertility. So I, would go through bouts of depression because I'd lose or, didn't get pregnant that month. So I was battling that while also digging into who do I feel has hurt me, or who do I feel like I've hurt that there's negative emotions attached to. And so I wrote one for my mom, and it was funny because it changed over time. Every year it got less harsh.
Mhm.
And eventually I remember one day it was like, I had the realization when I was looking through it, because she was like, I want to know. She called me and she was like, I want to know everything I've ever done to hurt you so that we can address it, so that I can be better. I need to know your boundaries. I'll respect them. I just want to be a part of your life. And I was like, at the time, I was like, I wish you didn't want to do this, because this is gonna be hard. Um, like, I don't know how to navigate that. I don't know if I have the space to navigate that. So we're on the phone and I'm like, well, I was like, I have a note that I've had written. It's changed over time. Uh, do you want me to read it to you? And she's like, yeah. And so I did. And it was like, that was a huge step. Never imagined I would read that to her, because in the past, I felt like she couldn't handle that truth.
Mhm.
But I had worked through so much of it over the years that by the time we got to reading it, it really came down to, I understand why all of these things happened and why you handled things this way. Um, you didn't have any tools. You had a lot of trauma. I've recognized I have trauma too. And now at the end of the day, the thing that's best for me that would allow us to have a relationship is for you to be doing well. And that's really what it came down to. Like, I
Mhm.
just want to see you do well. Like, I can't handle emotionally. I can't handle seeing you go through these cycles of doing well for just a little bit and then like absolute chaos and needing us emotionally because things aren't okay and you're not okay. Like, I had to distance myself because it was taxing, and I was like, I've got to be here for my own kids and husband, and it's too heavy, and it's like I don't have the bandwidth anymore is what it felt like. So I just put up walls and I was like, distance. I can't talk to you. I can't be around you. I can't see you until this all gets better. And
You were really doing what you did growing up too. You were being the parent
yeah,
still.
yeah. And it was hard because at that point it was like that was recognized and apologized for, but it was so comfortable that it would
Uh-huh.
easily go back into it. And then she'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't be talking to you about this, or but then for me, if she didn't tell me, I felt like, well, why is she not telling me, or why am I not involved? So it was like a toxic
Mhm.
attachment style, that I felt like I had to know or be so involved until I was at the point of like overwhelm and overload. And I was just like, I can't handle this anymore. Like, And like my husband would be able to notice if I had spoken to her, something was going, he'd be like, "What's wrong today?" He's like, "Did you talk to your mom?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Is it that obvious? Like, do I carry it like that? I didn't think it affected me that much." And so, through the stages of healing at the beginning, I was like, if it's if she affects me that much, she's the problem, right? So I'm going to, push her away, put up these boundaries. And then as I dug more into healing, I was like, I'm also the problem because it shouldn't affect me that much. If I'm really healed and in a good place, I should be able to have boundaries in place and hold them without feeling guilty or shameful, and accept her for who she is instead of who I think she needs to be.
Mhm.
And so that kind of comes full circle into those questions I think you asked about acceptance and accepting who she was. That was a big step. Forgiveness and actually being honest with her about how I felt in that note. I cried when I read the note too, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm reading this to her. And
Mhm.
it felt like I felt an emotional release, and she cried too, and it was a big step. Um, and it's interesting as time goes on through the healing process, how I feel for me personally at the beginning, it was very like, I think it's a tendency as human beings to get rid of the negative energy and put it on somebody else
Mhm.
and play the blame game, because it's hard to take responsibility for painful emotions or thoughts or experiences. And as you heal, you start to learn like there's a lot that I can take responsibility for. And in doing so, I think that's where you can become the victor in your life instead of the victim.
Mhm.
And that puts you in a much better place to build a better life for yourself. Because victimhood is something that is a generational pattern that I had to overcome. And it keeps you trapped, I feel, to be the victim of anything that has happened to you, your circumstances. So when I went down my healing journey and started with those letters, writing those letters, I when I would first write them, it was all about what somebody had done to me. And then it was like, oh, but I accepted this. Oh,
Mhm.
but what did I believe out of this experience? They didn't have any control over what I believed out of the experience, or what I labeled myself as a result of the experience. So those were things more and more that I started to realize and really try to take full responsibility for, because that gave me more power to heal. And so a lot of work went into all of that for about a year. And then it came down to, I wanted to find out generationally and dig into like my ancestry of like what they had been through, what traumas, what things had they done in their lives that could be living in my genetics or be in my genetic code, that when I encounter trauma, get ignited. Or if I react in a negative way, it gets ignited and turns these genes on. Like, what are those things? And so then it came down to taking responsibility for the sins of my forefathers. And that was really interesting, because when I got to that deep of a level, that's when my tests became different.
Mhm.
My autoimmune disease was going away. My allergies were going away. My infertility was not an issue anymore when I dug that deep. And there's a lot of different ways I think you can look at it. So I personally, what started me on that journey was, of course, looking into the psychology and the neurology, and then trying to find where that lined up with different belief systems. And for me, I wouldn't call myself religious, but I love the story of Jesus. And I found a lot of healing and example in him taking responsibility for the sins of the world. And I was like, that's what we're supposed to do, right? If this is the path you take, that's what you're supposed to do. And it's supposed to bring freedom and healing And there was a lot of healing in his story and people's lives that he impacted. So I was like, let's try this and mix it with this. And I'm going to take a psychological and faith-based approach and put it together and see what happens. And for me, it worked. I think that everyone has a different path. And of course, I live here. So living in America and growing up with roots in Christianity, I think it was easy for me to hold on to that and kind of know a bit about it. But that changed my life, taking responsibility for everything. And that's what made me overcome all of the negativity. And so when I look at the lies and when I see, when I read texts, religious texts or ancient texts, and there's anything about darkness or lies, I feel personally that all of the trauma that I had undergone were the lies and the darkness that had to be brought to the light, that had to be faced and let go of in order for me to be the best version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that if I can help anyone else to do or inspire anybody else to do, I think that's kind of my responsibility at this point. If my story can help somebody else, then I think that's what it happened for. I think that's any good thing that happens to any of us or any bad thing that happens to any of us. If we share it in truth and with the intention for it to make the world a better place, I think it can. For
Well,
sure.
and there's so many there's what you're talking about, the lies, for example. I using that terminology to me is so accurate because Jared talks about how his culture shift tour, right? And it's really, he talks about the identity shift.
Mhm.
And so much of the healing work that's done in the attachment field is about addressing those, let's use the word lies about yourself that you have that have developed through those years of experiences, and becoming that true version of yourself that was always there. It
Mhm.
just became molded into these different parts because of the experiences and the relational experiences that you were having. And so I love the parallels between the science and between science and religion. I mean, I
Mhm.
think that it speaks a lot of truth. And I want to add too, I obviously this is a podcast about attachment, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out the school counselor who really became your secure attachment base.
Mhm.
Then you're, describing your ability to be able to share with your husband and him really creating that secure base for you. You mentioned about not being able, we can't give what we haven't got within us. In being that secure base for you, he was really providing some of those attachment experiences that you didn't receive growing up because of numerous reasons. And
Mhm.
I think that brings just so much hope for people that while we wish it didn't have to be that way, that it's a spouse and it's not ideal, that there is hope out there that you can have some of these needs met at other points in your life to move towards a place of security in your relationship so that you can then have healthy, you mentioned how you struggle to have relationships with women,
Yes.
so you can move to a place where you can start to have healthier relationships in your life. And so I just think that I just love that those relationships are kind of highlighted throughout your journey. And now you're at a place, and I want to also make mention of you saying about taking responsibility and I want to make sure that our listeners understand, especially if they're going through something similar to this, that you're taking responsibility for your parts of this puzzle, parts of this journey, and making sure that they understand that we're not taking responsibility for the other person's actions. We're taking responsibility for what we do with those actions or the feelings that come about, or and yes, sometimes our own piece of it, that especially when it's an attachment relationship, that sometimes we become dependent. You
Yeah.
were dependent on hearing those what's going on with your mom. You were looking for that. And so at some point you had to take responsibility and say, no, if I want to set boundaries, then I have to take control of my side of things as well. So
Hmm.
I wanted to make that clarification and make it clear for people. And but just thank you for sharing your story and this journey of healing that you've been on. I feel like there's so much more that we could unpack, and so maybe we have to do a second episode, Mackenzie.
Well, yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot to unpack, of course, but I'm really glad you said that because something that really held me back from really being healed, and I thought I was healed, was removing space for forgiveness for others. So I justified all of the things that had happened and thought that in justifying them or, making excuses for why things happened for other people, that was me being the better, bigger person. But that was part of what was holding me back from actually having full forgiveness and allowing them to have to go through their own forgiveness. So, like you said, it's very important that you differentiate, like, this is what I'm responsible for. This is what I can take responsibility for. And I'm going to for my sake. And then still saying, like, but this was wrong and it shouldn't have happened. Like,
Mhm.
and like you said, another episode, but like in going into spaces in my childhood where there was sexual abuse. That's of course not something that you can say, oh, that was my fault. I brought it on myself. Like
Mhm.
that's not at all the case, but how I responded to it is what I can be responsible for. And there's got to be forgiveness for, all of the all of the things that go into the misunderstanding or, backgrounds of the people who did that to me. I understand is there, but that doesn't make it right.
Mhm.
So it's still wrong and it still has to be addressed. Whereas younger ages, I was like, well, something probably happened to them. So it like took away the forgiveness and me being able to recognize, like, no, this shouldn't have happened. Um,
Mhm.
but here's what I can change. Here's what I can take responsibility for. And I'm not going to let it ruin the rest of my life or my reactions or intimacy with other people because I'm taking charge. Which
Well, and that's where you find your true self, right? Is when you can really go to that place and open all of those layers up to discover who you are. And you do you want to be a person who just kind of is permissive and allows the that other person to continue being an enabler kind of thing, or do you want to
Mhm.
set those boundaries? And so, oh, there's so much.
There's so much. Yes. Boundaries are super important. Yeah, that could be its whole own conversation. But yeah, I really appreciate you giving me the space and just giving other people the space to have conversations like this. I think that more honest, authentic conversations such as these are what helps other people to be their best and truest self and to heal. So
Absolutely.
thanks for being
Absolutely.
so awesome and being so easy to talk to and caring,
You
to
guys,
create a space like this.
absolutely. That's what this space is for, is the sharing of knowledge, but also the holding of space for people and the journeys that they have been on and that, they continue to be on probably all their lives. And just
Mhm.
holding space for that.
Yep. It's lifelong. It's lifelong.
Well, thank you so much, Mackenzie, for joining me. I know that there are going to be many listeners out there that are going to benefit from hearing your story.
Well, that's all I could hope for. And I'm also one of those people that if you want to find me and ask me questions, you totally can. I think that's part of why I'm here and why we're all here is to help each other. So if that's ever something that's needed, then I hope people know that as well. Or look into the culture shift. And Jared talks about a lot of the program that we have that we take to schools is from what we all just talked about. So
From your experiences,
mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.